Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. I don't know what date you guys are going to be watching this on, but for me it's April 10th and I feel like now is a great time to start doing a little bit of a 2026 quarterly slash a third of the year reading wrap up. Because I do read quite a few books each year, I feel like it would be overwhelming to just do one at the very end of the year, and honestly that would probably be like a 3-hour video. So I'm probably going to be dividing it up and doing one of these each quarter of the year. I want to go over my reading goals with you guys and just kind of check in and see how we are doing. So in 2026 I wanted to read 85 books in total. I thought that that would be a doable number for me, and it's not too high to where I'm just reading just to have a number checked off of the list, because I really want to be able to enjoy my books and not just read to hit that number. And so I feel like 85 is a reachable number for me, but it will still be a little bit of a challenge. I think that's the happy medium. You don't want to do too many books to where it's a lot of work, but then you don't want to do too few to where you're not reaching your goal. So I do have mine set at 85, and if I'm being completely honest, that's going to be hard for me to hit this year. Usually I can hit that pretty easily, but 2026 has been a little bit crazy. If you guys watched my getting out of a reading slump video that I posted right before this one, then you would know that I have not been consistently reading in 2026. We've had a super busy past couple of months and I've kind of just put reading to the back burner. Since that video though, I've done a lot better of reading and I've added a few more books to my finished pile on Fable. Just to give you guys some numbers, I've read 15 books so far this year. My average rating is a 3.3 stars, which is actually kind of sad. I've only had a handful that I really have enjoyed, and so my goal is that I'm going to be trying to find books that I enjoy a lot more and DNFing those that I don't love. I love seeing people's stats, so I'm going to put them up here on the screen, but my top genre is romance, which is actually surprising because I feel like a lot of the books that I've read don't feel like romance books. So it says I've read 8 romances, 3 historical fictions, 2 fantasies, 2 literary fiction, and 2 sci-fi books. The 2 sci-fi books surprised me the most because if you know me, I don't read sci-fi. And then also on top of that, I'm surprised that I've only read 2 fantasies, which is sad because fantasy is my favorite genre, but I feel like I've just been a little bit burnt out from fantasy recently. I've read 15 books in total this year and I've DNF'd 2, so in total I've picked up 17 books, finished 15 of them, and put 2 back. I think I'm just gonna get the DNFs out of the way and go through those first. So the first book that I DNF'd is actually The Wedding People. I know that this is probably really controversial. I picked this copy up in Japan because I was so excited that I found a paperback one, and I left the little sticker on the back. I don't know if it's focusing. I had really high expectations for this because I was so excited for this and I've seen so many people love this. Honestly, it just wasn't for me. I DNF'd it at like 62%. I feel like it just wasn't what I was expecting, and not saying that it's a bad book, but it just wasn't what I wanted to read at that moment. I feel like it was a little bit darker than I was expecting. And I think that's probably on me for not looking into what the book is about and the trigger warnings of it. So I did DNF this one. I don't know if I'm going to be going back to this one or not, but I do have it on my shelf, so if I ever want to pick it up again, I totally can. Also, I want to do a little bit of a disclaimer. Just because I don't enjoy certain books doesn't mean that you guys won't love them. That's the great thing about reading, is everyone has such different tastes. So if a book sounds interesting to you guys in this video, but I didn't rate it super highly, please give it a try because I know everyone has different tastes. There's been so many books that I've really enjoyed that other people haven't, and the opposite. There's been so many books I haven't enjoyed but people have. So, but yeah, like I said, this book just wasn't for me, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the cover is so pretty. The next book that I DNF'd is called Pictures of You by Emma Gray, and to be completely honest with you, I was actually enjoying this book. What happened was I rented the audiobook from Libby, which is what our library system uses for ebooks and audiobooks, and so I rented the audiobook because I've been trying to get into audiobooks. I just don't really love audiobooks. I feel like I get so distracted, but I rented this one to do while I was driving and also cleaning and all of that. And what happened was it ended up getting returned to the library because I didn't realize that my 3 weeks were up. I did get, I think, 40% of the way through, somewhere around there, and I would actually be interested in finishing this book because I really liked the premise. I thought it was interesting. Basically, it's about a girl and she has no recollection of her memories. She gets into a car accident and she's told that her husband dies. She didn't even know that she had a husband, and from her memory she's still in high school. And so I was really enjoying this one, but like I said, that's on me. I should have renewed it, but there's a huge hold for it, and so I'm gonna have to wait for that one, but I would pick that one back up. So those are the only 2 books that I've DNF'd in 2026, which I feel like is actually pretty good. I don't DNF a ton of books. I feel like I know a little bit of my reading taste, and I only pick up books that sound interesting to me. Now I want to go into the books that I did finish. So January has been my biggest reading month so far. I read a total of 7 books, which is honestly pretty typical. I usually read read anywhere between like 6 to 10 books a month, and so that's pretty typical for me. The first 2 books that I read in January, I actually talked a little bit about in one of my past vlogs where I was reading one of this author's new releases. So the first 2 books that I read in January was Snowed In and Holiday Romance by Catherine Walsh. This is an interconnected, standalone type rom-com Christmas romance books. And I read these over Christmas break, but I didn't finish them until the beginning of January. You don't have to read one book or the other to be able to understand both of them, but there are characters that appear in both. So I would recommend reading both. You guys really don't have to. I really enjoyed Snowed In. That's the second book in the series, and I ended up rating that one, I think, a 4.5 star, almost a 5 star, which is really interesting because I feel like holiday books are usually a hit or miss for me, but I really enjoyed it. The premise of Snowed In, there's fake dating, they get snowed in together, and I just really loved how the characters were written and how everything wrapped up in the end. I feel like the couple made sense. I really was invested in their relationship and I really liked them both. But on the flip side, I read Holiday Romance, which I ended up rating a 3 star, which still isn't a horrible rating, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. Little summary of that one is our 2 main characters, they met at the airport one Christmas when they were flying back home for the holidays, and every single year since then they've booked their tickets together so that they could travel home and catch up. They don't really see each other besides when they travel home for Christmas, but it slowly turns into a romance. For me, the reason I gave it a 3 star is I feel like it was a little bit slow and I didn't really connect with the characters. It felt very surface level for me, but it is super cool because you get to see, I think it's 11 years of their relationship go by, and so that's really cool because I love a good backstory. I would definitely recommend those 2 during Christmas time. I don't know if people read Christmas books throughout the rest of the year. I personally don't. I only read holiday books during the holiday, but definitely put those on your TBR for when Christmas comes around. The next book that I read is called You Have a Match by Emma Lord. I actually picked this one up at Barnes & Noble because I read one of her other books called Tweet Cute, and she's a YA author, so keep that in mind. It's very YA writing in a sense where it's not super deep, there's not complex emotions, but they're easy, quick reads. This book I ended up rating a 2.5 star. Even though I have the physical copy, I did get this from the Libby app and listened to this on audiobook when I was building a puzzle. So that was super fun. The premise of this one is the main character, Abby, does a DNA test because one of her friends does one, and she finds out that she actually has a sister. So her and her sister plan to go to this summer camp together. Don't tell their parents that they know that the other one exists. And so they end up meeting at this summer camp, becoming really good friends. I enjoyed this one. The audiobook was pretty good and it was definitely very YA. And I feel like I'm at the point in my reading where YA books just don't really interest me all that much. And so that's why I gave it a 2.5 star, because I feel like it was a quick, cute read, but at the same time, there's nothing really complex about it. I would definitely put this on your TBR if you're a little bit of a younger reader that wants like Parent Trap type vibes. The next book that I read is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I ended up giving this book a 4 star because I really enjoyed this one. The only downside that I will say right off the bat is it felt a little bit slow for me, but I feel like most of his books are a little bit of a more slow burn, so keep that in mind. If you're okay with a little bit of a slower burn, literary fiction type book, definitely pick this one up. In this book, we're following our main character. She's a teenage girl. She goes in and out of foster homes, and so she's never really had a home of her own, but she's given a postcard by her mom, and on that postcard there was a specific picture on there, and ever since then she's been obsessed with that painting. So she goes to this art gallery to see the painting. She ends up meeting the man who painted the picture. In that picture, there's a couple friends depicted, and so he ends up telling her the story of his life and the hardships that he went through and his friend group went through, and it kind of explains what the painting is about. So this was a really beautiful story. I feel like there was a lot of raw, real emotions, and I feel like I really connected to a lot of the characters, so I would definitely say read this one. Oh, the next book that I have is up there on the shelf, and I don't think I want to pull everything down to get it. Okay, I'm just gonna insert the picture. The next book that I read is Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber, and I rated this book a 3.5 star. I love Stephanie Garber's writing. You guys are probably familiar with some of her other works. So she's done Caraval, and then she's also done Once Upon a Broken Heart. You guys have probably heard of those. Those are YA fantasy books. And I was really excited for this new book because it was marketed as more of an adult fantasy type book. I read the book and it was a super quick read. I was a little confused because it didn't feel super adult to me. It still felt very YA and it was still age appropriate for YA. For me, I was a little bit let down. I still enjoyed the book, but I just really enjoyed her other 2 series so much that I was expecting a little bit more. So in this book, we have our main character, and she's kind of on this hunt for a specific magical item, and if she doesn't find it, then she is going going to die at a certain time. There's a legend where if you go to this specific person, they can tell you the exact time that you're gonna die, and he did tell her that if she wants to stop herself from dying, she needs to find this certain item. And so the entire book is just her going on these adventures to find this item to hopefully save herself. And I still really enjoyed this one, and I would definitely recommend. I think I just had a little bit of higher expectations for the book, and honestly that's on me. I should have lowered my expectations a little bit. The last book that I read in January was the very first Mistborn. My dad actually sent me this trilogy because he is a Brandon Sanderson fan, and I told him that I wanted to get into some of Brandon Sanderson's books. So he did send me this series, and I started reading it. I finished the first one in January, and I'm actually halfway through the second one right now, so I'll keep you guys updated when I finish this one and my thoughts on it. The first one I rated a 4-star, which is really good for a first book in a long fantasy series. I was so intimidated to start any of Brandon Sanderson's books because I feel like he's just an intimidating author. I don't know why, but he just intimidates me. And so I've never picked up one of his books, but my dad told me that Mistborn is a great starting place, and so I started on Mistborn. I really enjoyed this book. I did consider DNFing it about halfway through because it was so slow and there's so many characters that need to be introduced, and the magic system is a little bit complex, but I'm so happy that I finished the book, and I'm really enjoying the second one. Now that I, continued reading on, I'm glad that I didn't DNF it. Basically, we're following our main character, Vin. Magic system is really hard to explain, and that's one of the most intimidating things about this series. He doesn't know this, but her entire life she's been a Mistborn, and basically what a Mistborn is they have all 7 of the metal powers. I know that's a horrible way of explaining it, but they have all 7 of the powers. Most people only have one of the powers, but a Mistborn has all of them. So she's never known this because she grew up on the streets and she never had any sort of training, and so she didn't know that she was a Mistborn. And she gets approached to go on this crew, and basically what the crew wants to do is they kind of want to overtake the city. They feel like it's not being run correctly, and so she joins that crew. And that's a very vague summary of this book because I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm on the second book right now and I'm really enjoying this. So if you guys have been putting off Brandon Sanderson, I would definitely say start with Mistborn. I know that there's other series as well you could start with. Those are all of the books that I read in January, so in total I read, I think it's 6 or 7 books. February was a little bit of a rough month, so I read Dear Debbie by Frida McFadden. That was her new book that released, and I enjoyed this one. I rated it a 3-star. I feel like with Frida McFadden, her books are super fast paced. The only thing is if you read a lot of them, they kind of get a little bit predictable, and so this one was predictable for me. But we're following our main character, Debbie, and she's a mom, and she writes this self-help type blog, but she kind of gives them crazy advice. You kind of start to realize that like Debbie's not all the way there, and so it's a little bit of a thriller mystery type book. But if you guys like Frida McFadden, I would definitely suggest picking that one up. The next book and the last book I read in February is The Favorites by Lane Fargo, and this is probably my favorite book I've read in 2026 so far. The more I think about it, the more this is a 5-star. I gave it a 4.5, and if you guys know me, if you guys have watched my videos, you guys know it's so hard for me to give a book a 5-star. And so I feel like the more I think about this, which is quite often, I feel like I need to bump it up to a 5-star. So this has been my favorite read of the year. First of all, the cover is just absolutely stunning. I love this cover. This book is about 2 figure skaters who grew up together, and they have a lot of history together, and it's kind of downplaying their history to say that they're just figure skating partners because they've been through a lot. They've basically lived with each other since they were children, and they become a figure skating team together. It goes through the ups and downs of that, and I think I really enjoyed this book when I read it because the Winter Olympics were on. And I feel like I learned a lot about figure skating, and so I did watch the Winter Olympics a lot more than I have in past years, especially the figure skating. So that was super cool, and it kind of transported me into this book a little bit. But I really enjoyed this one. This book takes place when there's a documentary being made about them. It kind of flips back and forth between the commentators in the documentary and then the main character, Katerina. It's her telling what actually happened. So it's really cool because it's like reality TV vibes, but then also you're getting the real story. So it kind of just shows how the media and the public can take things so out of context. Definitely looking forward to reading more of Lane Fargo's work because I just loved the writing of this. So please put this on your list. If you guys take anything away from this video, please read this book. So that wraps up what I read in February. And then March was a little bit of the same in a way. And so the first book that I read was How to Write a Love Story by Catherine Walsh. She wrote Snowed In and Holiday Romance. And this book came out in March and I was so excited for it. In this book, we're following our 2 main characters. Sam is a publicist and he lives in New York. And then Kiara lives in Ireland, I believe. Her dad was a famous fantasy author, and her dad ended up passing away with his series unfinished. And so Sam's publishing company reached out to her and said, hey, we'd offer you this amount of money if you would finish your dad's books. She said yes because she's crunched for money. She needed the money. And she ends up kind of struggling with writing this book. And so Sam is sent out to help her. And you guys probably can tell this is a romance book. They do end up falling in love. Everything was so surface level. Like, I couldn't tell why they actually liked each other. The romance started so late in the book to where I feel like the romance was a side plot. They didn't get along, but it wasn't in like a flirty type of way. It was really a working relationship. So I rated this book a 2-star, which is sad because I was really looking forward to this. I loved reading about her dad and the fantasy author that he was. The next book that I read is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I've been wanting to read this one for so long. I've had this on my TBR. It's one of those books where you have it on your TBR and you want to read it, but you literally just never get to it. So I decided to pick it up, and I'm so glad that I did because I loved this one. I read it so fast. I rated this a 4-star. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I rated this a 3.5-star because I feel like my only issue was that the ending finished so quickly, because I'm like, how are you gonna write 300 pages of a book and then finish up the ending in like 40 pages? That didn't make sense. This is a sci-fi thriller type book, and so I will say I was a little bit confused on what was going on, but it was supposed to be that way, which I feel like there's a big difference between being confused because the writing's not clear and being confused because that's how it's supposed to be. So this book was confusing because that's how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be unraveling this mystery in a way. So our main character, Jason, goes out to get drinks with his friends to celebrate his friend's scientific achievement, and on his way home he gets kidnapped and something happens, which I'm not going to say because it's kind of a big part of the story, and he ends up waking up in this world that's kind of like an alternate reality where his wife isn't his wife, his son isn't his son was actually never born, and he's not a teacher at the university that he thought that he was, and so he's trying to get clues on what's happening. This is a very sciencey book. I feel like there's a lot of science terms, and I'm saying that because I'm not a science person, and so maybe it's a normal amount of science terms. I just am not a sciencey person, but I really enjoy this one. I feel like it was so page turning. I haven't had a book like that in a long time where I've just laid down and read like 40% of it at once. So I really recommend this one. And because of this one, I've started to put more sci-fi type books on my TBR because I've always just wrote that genre off of like, oh, I'm not interested in this. So I'm going to be trying it a little bit more. One of my reading goals this year is to branch out and try new genres. And so I'm happy that I picked this book up because I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read in March, and the last one, because I only read 3 in March, is a book that I have been enjoying so much. My sister actually gave me this recommendation because she's been loving these books. And I've seen them at Barnes & Noble, but I've just never picked it up. These are available on Kindle Unlimited, and so that's where I've been reading them. And it is called The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, and there's different volumes of it. I believe there's 8 volumes out right now. First one was like 197 pages. The second one was around the same. The third one is a little bit longer at like 300-ish pages, but they're really short reads. I've actually read the first 3. So I read the first one in March and then the second and third in April so far. And so I'm just gonna go over all 3. So basically we're following our main character, Emma, and Emma is such a funny character. This is categorized as a historical fiction. This does take place around the 1800s. And so our main character, Emma, this is her diary, this is her journals, and it goes through each day. And so she'll have journal entries, and it basically talks about her life. Both of Emma's parents have passed away, and because of the time that she lives in, she isn't allowed to receive her allowance / inheritance. And so she ends up finishing school at her all-girls school. So she goes back to the house that her parents owned, which is called Lapis Lazuli. That's what they call it. Her cousin is living in this house right now, and he's actually in charge of a lot of the money, and he has free reign over the estate and her parents' money. Because when Emma's dad was dying, he wanted cousin Archibald to stay in the house until he passed away, because cousin Archibald is a lot older. But Emma and cousin Archibald do not get along at all, and she returns home and learns that cousin Archibald has spent a lot of her money and a lot of her allowance on clothing and horse races and all of the above. And so she's living in this house that should belong to her with her cousin Archibald, and it just goes through her day-to-day life. She lives in a really quaint town that is really funny. There's a lot of really odd traditions, and I'm just really enjoying this series. It has a lot of humor, but it's written super fast-paced. So the first one I rated 4 stars, the second one I rated I think 3 stars, and then the third one I really enjoyed and I rated that one 4 stars as well. And I'm excited to continue on in the series, and it's just interesting to see what Emma gets up to every day. Like I said, these are on Kindle Unlimited. I believe the author is writing the 9th one right now, now, which like I said seems like a lot, but they're really short books. They're really fast reads. The very last book, which I just finished for another reading vlog, is The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. I think that I'm saying her name correctly. I've had this one on my shelf for so long, and I'm so happy that I finally decided to read this. This one I'm having a hard time explaining, so I'm going to read a little bit of the back. So it says, in the near future, a civil servant begins work on a highly confidential project. A government ministry is gathering expats, and the expats are basically just random people that they're pulling from certain times in history. So they're gathering these expats across history to discover whether time travel is feasible. So they're trying to see if it has any effect on the human body, if it can be done. And so we're following our Bridge, our main character, and a Bridge is basically the assistant to the person pulled out of time. So she gets assigned Commander Gore from 1847, and he was a commander of a ship in an expedition. And so she's in charge of him, and she's trying to get him acquainted with modern times. She has to explain washing machines and Spotify and the internet, all of the above. And slowly she starts realizing that the Ministry of Time she works for isn't what she thought that it was, and they aren't doing what they said that they were gonna do. And so it's a little bit of a mystery, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 3 stars. I definitely enjoyed this one. So those are all 15 of the books that I've read so far in 2026, and the 2 DNF'd books. I'm excited to do one of these in a couple of months and update you guys on my reads. I'm hoping that I can reach my reading goal of 85 books in a year, but honestly I'm not sure if I will be able to, because my app says that I need to read 8 books a month to make that happen, and that just seems like a lot right now. I wanted to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I hope that you guys found some good books to add to your TBR. I will see you guys in my next vlog.